You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host and bourbon-soaked storyteller, Juliette Miranda.
Hey there, y'all. It's Juliette Miranda. Welcome to episode 132 of the Unwritable Rant. Today's episode is brought to you by Studio. Studio is a lifestyle brand that makes premium headphones with studio-quality sound and classic Scandinavian design. These headphones are the perfect combination of style and tech. Just go to studio.com, that's SUDIO.com, to check out their line of headphones, and if you see something you like, you can get 15% off your purchase when you use the code RANT during checkout. So, y'all, I have two bourbon-soaked stories for you about celebrity gambling and hate dates. But first, I need a little whiskey. I am pouring myself a glass of dry flask, Cask strength wheat whiskey. Cheers, y'all. This is some potent whiskey. It is 120 proof. And I bought this specifically because it's a wheat whiskey. I'm a big fan of wheated bourbon, so I wanted to do a little bit of a comparison here. And I'll tell you, this is pretty good. It's only aged 3 years, and I don't know the exact mash bill. I know it's at least 51% wheat, and I read somewhere that this may be 100% wheat, but I don't know how accurate that is. Either way, this whiskey is really fun. It tastes like toast. Good toast, mind you, not like bad burnt toast. It's full of that wheaty flavor and this buttery richness and just a little bit of sweet toffee flavor. And there's a lot of pepper and spice in here too. Either way, if you are looking to kind of mix up your routine a little bit, give this dry fly Cask strength wheat whiskey a try. I'm kind of digging it. So file this under random. I saw Ron Wood from the Rolling Stones not too long ago. My guy and I were having dinner at some swanky new Chicago restaurant, and there, off to the side, was Ron Wood. My guy spotted him first, so of course I had to go and parade off to the restroom so I could get a better look. And my guy was right. Ron was sitting at a foretop, enjoying his meal. At least he was until he looked up and locked eyes with me. And his expression, when he caught me staring at him, was perfect. Because he clearly saw me as trouble, and he clearly wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. I mean, the man has his fork in his hand, and it's hovering just shy of his mouth. And as he stares me down, it is obvious that he is mentally pleading, "Please, please, crazy lady, do not fuck up my dinner." Now, it does need to be said, I am a huge Ron Wood fan. Not so much because of the Rolling Stones, but for the faces. And if you ever check out my Twitter feed, you will know that I am prone to drunken proclamations of my absolute love for the faces. So seeing Ronnie Wood just steps away from me, well, I had about 183 mostly awful ideas about how to approach him and what I wanted to say. But that look he was giving me, it was a little scary, and it made me hesitate. And as I did, I was reminded, of all people, of Dennis Rodman. And I know that is something of a random association. I mean, my guy and I really are not basketball fans, but you don't have to be to know Dennis Rodman when you see him. That's one guy who just stands out. And especially so when you were at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, just like my guy and I were when we once encountered him. This was a good 10 years ago, and it was the first time that I'd ever been to Las Vegas. To that point, my gambling experience was limited to a few kind of hesitant pulls on a slot machine on a Midwest riverboat. I didn't really understand the appeal of gambling, but one night in Vegas changed all of that. My guy was on a serious winning streak at the craps table, and I found myself caught up in the mayhem that goes with it. I mean, free drinks are flowing, and people are cheering, It's like your own pop-up mob. I have no idea what I am doing at the table. Quite honestly, to this day, I am convinced that craps makes absolutely no sense. So I'm just handing chips over to my guy, who places them on the table for me, and then just hands back increasingly larger and more colorful stacks of chips back to me. So I'm cheering with the crowd. At what, I don't really know, but as long as the chips keep stacking up, I figure it doesn't really matter. My guy has the dice and is taking his turn as the shooter. There's more cheering, and as I take a very healthy glug from my cocktail, I notice that the area behind me has gone kind of still. And that is because there, making his way up the center aisle, is Dennis Rodman. He is flanked by a small army of munchkins, who really aren't all that short, but they're so dwarfed by Rodman that they take on kind of like a tough guy swagger so that they can make up for the size difference with attitude. They immediately remind me of the Lollipop Guild. My guy's table is way too hot to really care about this celebrity appearance, and that is enough to catch Rodman's attention. He stops to consider the table for a few minutes, and then he works his way in next to me so that he can place a bet. His munchkins form this protective shield behind him, all except for one guy. This guy's bravado is a little bit bigger than the rest, and to prove this, he elbows his way in between me and Rodman and knocks right into my drink in the process. Well, my cocktail spills all over his very fancy white sneakers, and he's not happy about it. He lets loose with this string of really loud insults, calling me a clumsy broad and yelling about how women shouldn't be allowed at tables. I'm just drunk enough to embed my stiletto heel into that rabid munchkin's forehead. But my guy intervenes. He steps between us and just regards the munchkin quietly. He doesn't say a word to him. But then he looks over his head and up at Rodman, and then he asks, "Does your friend need to be escorted out of here?" It was early enough in our relationship that I really hadn't seen my guy go into protective mode before. And I kind of had to admire his balls. He had, in one graceful move, reduced that silly little munchkin to nothing more than a toddler being ratted out to his dad. And to his credit, Rodman handled it well. He gives his friend kind of a sharp nudge and he says, "No, man, we're cool." My guy accepts the answer and then resumes his position as the shooter. He takes up the dice, but before he can roll, that munchkin has to weasel in and place a bet. He slaps a stack of chips down on the don't pass line. And my guy looks at him and he says, "Really?" Even the other people at the table look peeved, and at the time I really didn't understand why. Now I have since learned that betting the don't pass line means you're betting against the shooter to make his number. It is a legit bet, but in this instance, he was essentially giving my guy, and everyone at the table who was benefiting from his winning streak, a giant fuck you. If he had meant to rattle my guy or shake his good fortune, he really didn't know what he was up against. Even in the worst of circumstances, my guy always holds his ground, and this was no exception. So he tosses his dice to the far end of the table where they bounce and they roll and then they stop, showing a 4 and a 2. And that was exactly what my guy needed to win. And apparently so did Rodman, because he starts yelling. And then he gives my guy a high five. A very, very high five. Now the munchkin is not happy one bit. But before the dealer has a chance to take his money away, that munchkin is slamming more chips down on the don't pass line. Well, Dennis Rodman looks down at his little friend and says, "Don't you place that bet." But the dickhead holds firm. And for that roll, and for the next 3, he loses every one. There are people who lose well, and people who do not. This guy was the absolute worst. Every time the dealer dragged his money away, he'd take a few twitchy hits off his cocktail, yell at the table for laughing, and then do this little stompy dance in place while he waited for the next roll. And here's the thing. He didn't have to bet like a contrary little cock. He could have just bet with the rest of the table and actually won money. But no, he didn't want to do that. My guy keeps playing for a little bit longer, but ultimately we kind of take in the stack of chips that we've amassed, and we decide that we have pressed our luck long enough. So we call it quits and color up our winnings to some seriously dirty looks from that munchkin. After tipping the dealer, my guy tosses a $25 chip over to Dennis Rodman, and then he says, "Give this to your friend. I think the buffet is a better bet for him." Everything around us just goes dead. People at the table are watching. They're staring us down, waiting for something to happen. That munchkin looks ready to chew his way through my guy's kneecaps. And I'm certain we are just a heartbeat away from being engulfed in a brawl. But Dennis Rodman, he tosses his head back and starts to laugh. Really deep, contagious laughter, and it trails after my guy and I as we walk away. We were far too excited to end the night completely, so we wander over to a nearby cocktail lounge and settle down with a couple of drinks. I didn't really expect to see Dennis Rodman again, but an hour later, he and his munchkin crew take over a VIP booth across from us. His angriest of munchkins is looking a little wounded, and he's tucking himself close under Rodman's wing to avoid further injury. And he really does not look happy when Rodman calls out to my guy and I and motions us over to his table. I wasn't exactly sure if it was a good idea to join Dennis Rodman at his table. I mean, considering the parting dig that we'd hurled at his sidekick and all. But hey, this was Vegas. My guy and I look at each other, shrug, and we just wander on over and see what's up. And I'll tell you, it was the best gamble of the night. Dennis Rodman kept the drinks flowing and had us laughing for a solid hour. So this is what I'm thinking about that other night as I had a stare down with Mr. Ron Wood. The man has stopped chewing. He is so alarmed by my presence. There is clearly a ball of food stuffed in his cheek that he refuses to swallow because he is so upset by me staring at him. Even the other people at his table are just silent and braced. And the moment is so needlessly tense, it is practically vibrating. It was in every way, shape, and form the exact opposite of how I felt when confronted by Dennis Rodman. Had I ingested a few more cocktails, or had Ronnie given me even just the slightest trace of a smile, perhaps I would have plopped myself down in his lap for a good chat. But if I have learned anything from my guy, it's knowing when to take a chance. Just like he knew he could take a playful jab at Dennis Rodman and his friend, I knew full well that if I said anything to Mr. Ron Wood, well, let's just say it would end with one of us in handcuffs, and it wouldn't be him. So, y'all, for as much as it pained me to do it, and for as much as I hate to say this now, I really do, I hate to say it, I ingested all of my crazy groupie instincts, just stuffed them right down in me. I just nodded at Ron and kept walking. I know. But let me just say this. At the very least, I console myself with two things. One, that I did in fact have a moment with Ron Wood. And two, when one of Ron's friends eventually asked him, "Who the hell was that crazy chick?" he could honestly answer, "I have no fucking idea." And I will consider that a win. Cheers, y'all. So remember, y'all, you can improve your experience listening to this podcast or any podcast or your favorite music or TV show or whatever if you are using studio headphones. They have on-ear and in-ear headphones, and they're beautiful. They look great, they sound great, they fit great, and I am in love with mine. And if you're like me and like girly things, they come in pink. So be sure to head to sudio.com, sudio.com. Check everything out, and if there's something that strikes your fancy, get 15% off when you use the code RANT during checkout. So I have a question for all of you. Do you happen to know a know-it-all? And I don't mean a smart person or someone who knows a lot about one specific thing. I mean a person who explicitly believes themselves to know everything. I'll tell you, they're a real treat to know, and even worse to date. You've probably heard me preface a lot of my dating horror stories by saying something like, well, he looked good on paper, or he seemed like a decent guy at first, but this time is different. For this story, I'm going to call this guy Einstein. And years ago, his profile on Match.com caught my eye. Not because he traveled the world or saved orphans or loved long snuggles, but because he looked like an asshole. Not a nice guy hiding asshole tendencies, not a nice guy pretending to be an asshole, but an all-round, genuine dick-faced asshole. For example, the opening line of his bio quoted his IQ, 145 allegedly, and it included a bulleted list of all of his educational pursuits. Fun things like 18th century mathematics, 19th century sculptors, and quantum computing. Oh, and his photos. They look like a collection of stock images. Here's Einstein demonstrating his smarts at a whiteboard. Here's Einstein looking critically at a mural. And ooh, here's his casual one. Einstein inhaling the fresh scent of a tomato. I have to admit, this pedantic wonder had me intrigued. Not because I liked him, but because I absolutely despised him. You see, at this point in my dating history, I was ready to call it quits. I had been on too many dates with men and women whom I thought had potential, only I would later find out that at best we were just a bad match, and at worst they had a criminal record or a pet bird they liked to wrestle with. So I was done. But then I found this person that I outright disliked. And it seemed, kind of refreshing. I can't describe it any other way, but it felt really good to have zero expectations, no pretenses, just clean, simple disgust. Really, what better way to start a relationship? I sent Einstein a quick note and essentially suggested a hate date. I wrote, well, you seem like a jerk, and I doubt you'll like me at all. Want to go get some coffee? And he responded, he did. And he sent me a dating questionnaire. And he said that before we could go out, he needed to see if I could mentally keep up with him. His very first question asked if I could identify with Nietzsche's concept of the overman. Sure, he misspelled Nietzsche, and then he later misused the word parameter, but that just made me disliking him more. And the whole thing was just so delightfully dicky, I actually took the time to complete his questionnaire. And apparently my answers pleased Einstein, because he agreed to meet me for coffee the very next day. I arrived early, ordered, and sat down with my drink, not really giving a crap at all if Einstein showed up or not. God, it was liberating. Maybe hate dating was the solution to all my issues. If you start in the basement, you can't get any lower, right? Not necessarily. Einstein arrived a few minutes late, and he had the fashionably disheveled look of a professor at an all-girls liberal arts college. He orders his drink with this deep voice that is both calculated and precise. And then he ruins any potential charm he may have had by spelling his name out for the girl and over-enunciating all 4 letters of it. When he sees me, he nods in my direction, and by way of greeting, he says, "I find coffee shops to be remarkably bourgeoisie, don't you?" Bourgeoisie? The word he wanted was in there somewhere, but it came out of his mouth sounding more like a disease. It occurred to me that I could correct his pronunciation, but why bother? So I just cheerfully shrug and I invite this pretentious clown to sit down. And oh God, y'all, he is just dripping in misplaced confidence. He just drapes himself over the chair as if I should be thankful for his presence. Then he gives me that once-over, the up and down with his eyes, and he says, "I must commend you. Very few women have the wherewithal to complete my questionnaire." Well, when he said that, I stifled a snort, and instead I tried to get a conversation going by asking Einstein where he went to school. He casually sips his coffee and considers my question for a moment, and then he says, "Education is a system of Marxist brainwashing." Oh my God. This guy was just such an ass. And that was the first of many sweeping statements that Einstein would use to dismiss questions that he did not want to answer. Like when I asked what he did for a living, he quoted a line from The Fountainhead, which I interpreted to mean that he was unemployed. So for the next 30 minutes, I learned absolutely nothing about Einstein, except the fact that he clearly thought he was smarter than me. Every time I would start to say something, he would finish the statement for me, dropping smarts the way some people drop names. The floor under our table was littered with flimsy references to French poets, hazy theories on astronomy, and, amusingly, the suggestion that Stephen Hawking is a hack. I'm not saying I'm some raving genius. Considering the fact that I still occasionally think that 60 cents equals $1, obviously my logic skills are a bit flawed. But I know a pseudo-intellectual asshole when I see one, and all it would take is one good sneeze to blow this guy's smarty pants right off. We had reached the bottoms of our coffee cups when Einstein excused himself to the restroom. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. I did not like Einstein one bit, but I was taking far too much devious joy in listening to him make an ass out of himself to really want to leave just yet. Which I admit kind of made me an ass too. So as I'm debating this situation with myself, my thoughts are interrupted by an odd gurgling noise that came from the restroom behind me. This was one of those single unisex bathrooms, and it was the same one that Einstein had entered just a few minutes ago. I pause. It's quiet. And then I hear the noise again. This time, though, it's louder, and accompanied by choked retching, which was really guttural and sounded almost as if a furball got caught up in the engine of a Harley. Now, I'm not the only one who heard this noise. Everyone in the area is looking just repulsed by this staccato horking that's coming out of the bathroom. And it doesn't stop. If anything, it's becoming more panicked. And we're all just kind of looking around going, "Oh God, what's going on in there?" And then I have to wonder, is it my responsibility to knock on the door? I mean, I don't know Einstein. I don't even like him. But all those choked, gurgling noises coming out of that bathroom kind of sounded like he was dying. I really wanted to run away from the table and just drive home. But what if he was dying? I mean, hell, anyone who knew him, or me for that matter, well, they'd probably assume that I'd tried to kill him. So goddammit, I guess it is up to me to see if he's okay. I approach the door and there's that noise again. It's just like, "Blah, blah, blah." So I knock. And I'm like, "Einstein? It's Juliette. Do you need help?" And he gargles out some kind of response. So I say, "Do you need an ambulance?" And again, I get that noise. But I hear him unlock the door. And all I can think is, fuck, he wants me to go in. I'm not sure what I expected to find in that bathroom. Perhaps some poorly orchestrated homage to Michael Hutchence. But whatever I thought, it certainly couldn't have prepared me for what I did see. The water in the sink was running, and there is a tube of toothpaste that has been knocked on the floor. And there, in the center of the tiny bathroom, was Einstein, with a toothbrush lodged in his throat. What the fuck? His eyes are wet, and drool is just streaming from his frothy lips. He has one hand gripping the handle, and his other hand is waving wildly at me and motioning to the toothbrush in his open mouth. So I peer into that abyss, and I see that this genius has, God knows how, jammed that toothbrush down behind his tonsils. And he is making these monstrous noises, drooling and begging at once. And I realize he needs me to pull that damn thing out of his mouth for him. No, I don't want to do that. What if I yank his tonsils out with it? I shake my head and I start backing away, but he keeps grunting at me, and I'm thinking, fuck a goddamn duck. Is this my punishment for going on a hate date? Fine. I look back into his obnoxious word hole, and I see that if I just kind of twist the brush a little bit, I can probably pull it free without doing too much damage. So I take that handle, I count to 3, and I do my best to unplug his face. Oh, his relief is immediate, and he just rushes to the sink to cough out all that residual toothpaste and drool, and I, meanwhile, start to back out the door to make an exit. I just ignore all of the questioning glances that I am getting as I hurry out of the coffee shop. Again, I want to get in my car and drive away. I certainly didn't have anything to say to Einstein, but I did want to make sure that he was reasonably okay. So I stand on the sidewalk and I wait for the guy. He walks out looking so broken and so slumped, I actually felt sorry for him. Never have I ever seen anyone's facade so efficiently or swiftly shattered. And in a way, it was kind of tragically beautiful. So I look at him and I say, what the hell happened in there? And then he blushes and he explains. He says, well, I knew we were going to be leaving and, well, I really wanted to kiss you. So I brushed my teeth to make sure it would be nice. That was the first genuine thing he had said to me all day. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was just nice to see a glimpse of the real guy under this smarty pants attitude. So I look up at that sad face that really didn't know it all, and I think, what the hell? I'll kiss him. But just as I am leaning in, just before our lips make contact, he catches sight of a group of kids huddled around a handheld video game. He rolls his eyes and then he says, technology is the opiate of the masses. Oh, good. There's that asshole I met. Well, he could forget that kiss. When you cannot manage the technology of a fucking toothbrush, you do not get leave to criticize a video game. So instead, he gets a handshake. I say that meeting him has been an education, and I start to walk toward my car. Just before I get in, though, I decide to give him one small parting gift. So I call out, hey, Einstein, the word is pronounced bourgeois. Try not to choke on it the next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Unwritable Rant Podcast. To catch all of the back episodes of the podcast or to check out any of our cool swag like flasks or t-shirts, head to theunwritablерant.com. While you're there, be sure you sign up for my emails. Every so often, I do fun little contests for all of the email subscribers and give away things like flasks. And speaking of giveaways, I just want to throw a huge shout out to Adam from the Odd Dad Out podcast, who was the winner of our studio headphone giveaway. I'm sure he is going to enjoy his awesome headphones, which are on the way to him right now. Well, y'all, I hope you have a great week. I will be back to chat with you some more next Sunday. Cheers, y'all.
Go to theunwritablerant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter at Morning Neurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton, hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweetest taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this.